In today's show, is Damian Lillard angling for the Portland Trailblazers to trade for Kevin Durant? How the heck would that even happen? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Why not make this show your first listen every single day, free on all platforms, available wherever you get podcasts. So just start your day listening to Locked On Blazers. Tell your friends to do the same, and then you'll have something to chat about and argue about by the time you get to lunch. In today's show, actually, let's start with this. The answer to the question is no, probably not, no. Now let's talk about what the question is. On Saturday afternoon, we're going to talk a lot about Kevin Durant here. We're going to talk about Kevin Durant and coming to Portland. And let me do a little preamble. Other than the no, probably not being the answer to the question that you're asking about Kevin Durant. A listener had asked a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, in a mailbag episode, like, how do I choose what is newsworthy or not? And it's like, some of it is just I have enough sort of connections in and around the league that I know kind of what is real news and what is smoke, and I'm kind of like my skill is sussing out the logic. This doesn't really pass the smell test for is it news? But it's fun, and I think maybe the most important thing that this show should be is entertaining. Basketball is fun. We lose sight of that sometimes. So this is a fun thing. I want to say that here. This is fun. Let's have fun. Where did this Kevin Durant to Portland stuff come from? Let's talk about where it all started. It started a couple different places, but in earnest, it started on Instagram, the social media app, on Saturday afternoon when Damian Lillard sent out a story. It's like some of you are young and are going to think I'm old for explaining Instagram. Some of you are maybe a little older and be like, hey, what is an Instagram story? So I'm going to meet the older generation and bring them back to the younger generation here. The Instagram story is it's like a temporary photo you can put up that lasts for 24 hours. It's not like a main feed thing. It's like a little click through instantaneous share, much more temporary shares. Those are people share like, hey, I'm at the beach type of thing, as opposed to like, here's a photo of my dog. Those are the two differences. But for Dame shares a photoshopped image of him and Kevin Durant wearing Portland Trailblazers jerseys. He then reshares a couple other of his friends and commenting on it. I believe there were three different people, three different little slides in his stories with Kevin Durant and him photoshopped into Trailblazers jerseys. This is meaningless on its own, right? This is meaningless on its own. Like, there's a couple different ways to read this, and I think all of them are true at the same time. Number one is Dame is trolling, 100%. He is aware of what time it is. He's aware that free agency starts this week. He's aware of the little turmoil in Brooklyn and how the Nets might be breaking it up. He's aware of Kevin Durant's connection to the Portland Trailblazers because they took Greg Oden and not him. If you don't know that, they took Greg Oden and not him. It was a real bummer back in 2007. Dame is trolling. He is just being an internet person and like putting something out there for controversy. I think that is like first and foremost the true. Secondly, Dame probably wants to play with Kevin Durant. I think that's true in and of its own. Who wouldn't? Who among us would not want to play with Kevin Durant? I know one guy plays for the Lakers. But it's like pretty appealing teammate for the last however long, 15 years, going back to 2007, when he was immediately a very good scorer and then, at worst, one of the 25 best players to ever play in the NBA. That's how good Kevin Durant is. Like the worst you could call him is something like the 25th best player ever. He's been incredible. So that's number two. Dame wants to play with Kevin Durant. Dame's trolling a little bit. And number three is like Dame wants to put pressure on the organization to be good and win now. And if there's a swing, this big enough swing, he's gonna do it publicly as well as privately. It's not like Dame's not in constant communication with the front office, and his people aren't in constant communication with the front office around the league, and wheeling and dealing and all of those types of things. Like that is absolutely happening, and Dame is pulling strings, and his folks are pulling strings behind the scenes, constantly, and have been for months. That's just like sort of the nature of stars in the league, right? But the sort of public posturing is to like, yeah, why not get it out there? So that post lasted a couple hours. He took it down after maybe a little less than 2 hours. He took it off his Instagram, deleted the stories off his post or off his feed. It was enough to get people's attention. People were riled up, and like I said, for those 3 obvious reasons. Just straight up trolling, genuine interest, and public posturing. I think all 3 are true at the same time, and I wouldn't put any stronger weight on any of them, because like Damian Lillard might be very serious about I would like to play with Kevin Durant, but he also might be very serious about just like trolling and having a little fun on the internet, and like knowing that he's going to stir up a little nonsense when he does it. But there's like some truth here in the sort of like super abstract, like if you squint as hard as you possibly can, you can see the sort of the truth behind the Kevin Durant stuff. Is because the Nets are in a bad spot. The Nets find themselves in a funk. It was reported last week in multiple spots, including on Mark Stein's newsletter, and also Shams Charania of The Athletic, that the Kyrie Irving situation, he's has a player option for this year and is extension eligible. Him and the Nets can't agree on an extension, because who would want to give Kyrie Irving guaranteed money, because he's been a part-time employee for health reasons and for personal reasons for years. He just doesn't play very much, and you don't know when you're going to get him and how much. He's an inconsistent fella, very, 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 very talented, inconsistent fella. So locking in a full maximum contract might cause some team to balk, particularly a team who's seen it up close. And because of the impasse, or the sort of beef, the continuing impasse with Kyrie Irving, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic, Kevin Durant is monitoring that situation, and if there is no Kyrie, if that blows up, he might ask out as well. Whoa. That would be in some ways this like massive seismic shift, and it was reported right before the draft for, probably because it was true then, and also maximum impact heading into the big, transaction day that is the NBA draft. I would guess, like I'm not reporting this by any means, but I would guess some of the bigger names not moving, like Jeremy Grant was traded like as this news was coming out, but before like specifically the Kevin Durant monitoring the situation type of thing came out. But the other sort of big names that were like potentially going to be traded, like Malcolm Brogdon and John Collins, perhaps that slowed up the market, because other teams are like, hold on. If Kevin Durant is moving, and if that's going to happen, or if Kyrie Irving is going to be traded, like we want to keep what we got here, and we'll agree to a trade down the line, but like we want to absorb something and like be a beneficiary of a giant trade, or we want to get in on the madness, and like if Kevin Freaking Durant is going to be traded, we want to be involved. So the answer to the question, as I started the show, is no, probably not. But let's have a little fun. I want to talk about how it could happen. How do the Blazers get Kevin Durant? Let's talk about that in the second segment, because there is like I said, there is a legitimately good chance that Kevin Durant plays for a new team next year. Not super good, because like if you have Kevin Durant, you're going to try as hard as you possibly can to always have Kevin Durant. I think that's the move. But like if he does, he's powerful enough, and the way the league works, if players ask out, it can happen. So let's talk about it can happen and what it looks like for the Portland Trail Blazers in the second segment. But first, let me tell you about Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. More lines, more props, more odds than ever before. If there is a Game 7 of the NHL Stanley Cup, you'll be able to bet on that. Game 6 is happening as I record this right now. If you don't want to bet on hockey, you can bet on everything all summer long, including MLS action, NWSL action, Major League Baseball. You can bet on combat sports and tennis and golf. Whatever you're looking for, you're also going to find information to make you a more informed bettor, and that's the real advantage of Bet Online. So if you go sign up for a free account right now, you can learn what you can get on the inside, get some insider's tips on how to win some money. So go take advantage today. Be an informed bettor, win some money. That's Bet Online, where the game starts. Still a pass first point guard, still Mike Richmond. And I usually do that to open the third segment. We did it here too. All right. Let's just roll into the second segment anyways. Kevin Durant, how does he get here? Here being my house in North Portland. Yeah. New roommate. You can stay downstairs, Kevin. It's going to be hot this summer. How does Kevin Durant end up on the Trailblazers? Again, the answer to your question is no, probably not. It doesn't happen. It doesn't. It's not going to happen and probably can't happen. But I am nothing if not sort of thorough in fantasizing about this, because Kevin Durant is so freaking good that if there is even a vague chance that he's going to be on your team, or if the best player on your team is like sort of slyly pushing for it to happen, or not slyly, like actively trolling and saying like, get us Kevin Durant, and Yusuf Nurkic is retweeting the image later on with a puzzle piece emoji, the same puzzle piece emoji he sent out when they acquired Jeremy Grant. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about how it would happen. First, Kevin Durant is the beginning of a 4-year max contract extension. He's making about $43 million this coming season, is under contract for 3 years beyond that. He's really stinking good. Just as a reminder, because I think the way the Nets went out this year was pretty, they flamed out as loudly and as just emphatically as any team possibly can. But like in the 2021 season, Kevin Durant was widely regarded as the best player in the world. He was the best player in the league. This is the best player in the world. He is 11 months removed from that, 13 months removed from that, I guess. The NBA playoffs are backed up a little bit. So maybe 11 months removed from most pundits saying this is the best player in the world. And then Giannis came and took it from him. And now we're in a different space where Giannis is the best player in the world, but people don't say it very loudly. So the contract is what it is. This is the price for the best player in the world. He's also 33 years old. He was also fantastic this season when healthy, but year 15, all of that. For the Blazers to acquire Kevin Durant, it's going to be through the trade market, and the Blazers have used their large traded player exception to acquire Jeremy Grant. It was too small to absorb Kevin Durant's contract. It was never going to come into play. He's not going to hit free agency because he's under contract for 4 more years. So it's really, for everybody, Kevin Durant would be traded somewhere. And the trade is going to be big. When you trade one of the best players in the history of the sport, it's a big trade. These guys don't move via trade particularly often. That is not how the best of the best go places. They kind of wait and then march there on their own out of Oklahoma and to San Francisco and then on to Brooklyn is how one particular path went. But so to make a trade with Kevin Durant work, the Blazers are going to have to come up with $35.5 million in salary. That's not to the penny, but 30. So I think you could have 35.3 and get there, but over $35 million in salaries to get there. One of the complications is that sign and trades, be it Yusuf Nurkic or Anthony Simons, and you better believe it's going to be Anthony Simons in a trade for Kevin Durant, would only count for half of the money. So if you sign Ant for $22 million, it only counts as 11 as far as the salary matching and trades go. So whatever it is, the Blazers are going to have to come up with $35 million. They can get there, but you have to get there with a package that appeals to a Brooklyn Nets team that you assume is tearing it down. They don't want it makes Josh Hart, who's really valuable to good teams, maybe less valuable to a team like the Nets. Because he's a little bit older and it's he's not a sort of young cost control player that you can grow with. Anthony Simons, obviously you're going to pay him a bunch of money. He's at least under contract for a little while, but some version of the trade would involve Eric Bledsoe, Nazir Little, Anthony Simons, and probably the draft rights to Shaedon Sharpe. If you really want to get into the weeds here, watch the Blazers closely. If they don't sign Sharpe to his contract, which is pretty common, happens around the league where a handful of rookies won't sign into summer league, maybe a day into summer league, they're oh yeah, I'm going to sign my contract. That's just posturing stuff. Everybody gets 125% of their salary slots, but sometimes players hold out for whatever. But to include Shaedon Sharpe in a deal, he would have to not officially sign, right? So if he does, you can remove him from the deal, and then it's Ant and Nas, Eric Bledsoe, and Justice Winslow. The money gets a little bit dicey for the Blazers. It's one of the challenges, but Bledsoe's money almost certainly has to be involved. Anthony Simons probably just for the trade value, and Azir Little just for the trade value. And even then, you probably have to kill the trade protections on the pick that's owed to the Chicago Bulls. The Blazers have a lottery protected pick owed to the Chicago Bulls until 2028. You probably have to kill the protections on that, so then you can trade future first to the Nets. And you might be saying, Mike, that's wild. That is a wild overpay. And I'd say, yeah, it's Kevin Durant. It's Kevin Freaking Durant. That's like, if you don't want to pay it and he's really going to be traded, someone else will. I will say this. If Kevin Durant gets traded to the Blazers, it's because he wanted to come here. It's because he said, yes. Damian Lillard's Instagram post. I love that Instagram post. I think I would look great. They should have drafted me over Greg Oden anyways. I'm happy to move back to the Pacific Northwest, et cetera, et cetera. Like they're not going to trade for Kevin Durant against his will. Although 4 years under contract, it might be worth the risk because you're going to get 2 years of one of the best players in the league. Like Kevin Durant on your roster, period, gives you a chance to win an NBA title. I truly believe that. Kevin Durant and Damian Lillard on your roster at the same time puts you among the title contenders. Like that's the appeal of it. Sure, you lose Shaedon Sharpe. Sure, and like in this hypothetical trade just to make the money work. Sure, you lose Nas and Ant and Shaedon Sharpe. All of your intriguing young parts. And you are thin beyond your sort of immediate depth, and you're expensive. You're, have a fat luxury tax bill and all of those things. Yeah, yes. I think that's one of the reasons why it won't happen. One of the many reasons why it won't happen. One, hard to concoct a trade. Two, they've got to do some finagling even to have picks to trade. 3, Kevin Durant's got to want to come here. 4, someone has to not trump their trade. All of those things, right? All of those things. But like you do it because it gets you there. It gets you closer than you've ever been. I mean, closer than you've been since closer than you've been since the year 2000, right? Closer than you've been in the last 25 years or last 22 years and some change. Certainly as close as you were in the early 90s. And back in those really good teams of the late 70s. 80s Blazers don't get a lot of love. The only time the team has ever been like a little bit bad. They've been decent forever. But the decent forever is kind of the poison. Kevin Durant pushes you past the decent forever. You go all in. And you might be saying that's a crazy package. I agree that's a crazy package. I also think pretty earnestly that that's about what the going rate would be to trade for a Kevin Durant under contract for 4 more seasons. The Nets, like I said, they don't want to do it, right? They don't want to do it. So you just cash in all of the chips you have and you absolutely go for it. It might not work, but it's as close as you would ever be. And it's not going to happen. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. I want to be clear. I do not think it's going to happen, but it's fun. So I wanted to walk you through the logic of the fun. You have a chance to get one of the best players in the history of the sport, a dude who's, a year removed from being the best player in the game, certainly has the ability to get back to that level, someone who has the skill set and the skills to age really wonderfully. Like Kevin Durant is a bucket who's 7 feet tall. Even if he slows down a little bit, he's still going to be able to really shoot it and be 7 feet tall, or 6'11" for my measure him in shoes heads. But there was a great New York Times story about how Kevin Durant is actually 7 feet tall, probably. Let me answer the question that I answered at the beginning. No, probably not. But that's the logic of how it would happen. And I hope you followed me along that logic because, I'm in favor of it just because it would be amazing. I don't think it would be maybe not very responsible, but it would be amazing. So yeah, go for it. Go for it. All of the patience I was preaching around draft time, that I'm out. It's out the window. Sure, it's Kevin Durant. Do what it takes. And if you don't care for Kevin Durant as like a person, yeah, get in line. He's kind of an annoying fella. He is what he is. But yeah, do it. If it's on the table, do it. What I want to do to close the show is talk a little bit of a lesson in draft capital, a lesson in the value of draft capital, because I think I was a little bit wrong on what the Blazers were going to pay for Jeremy Grant. And then that same thing that was traded for Jeremy Grant was turned around in another trade. And I want to sort of talk about draft capital in the sort of broader sense of what we learned on draft night Thursday evening. But first, let me tell you about rockauto.com. If Kevin Durant's going to drive here from Brooklyn, he's going to need a reliable car. And the best way to get that reliable car, driven from Bed-Stuy or Bushwick or wherever he might live, all the way to Kenton or Arbor Lodge, wherever he's going to move in North Portland, he's going to need reliable parts, and he's going to want to save some money and save some time. So he can head on over to rockauto.com. You'll save 30, 50, 100% more than if you were to go to the chain auto parts store or the dealership, where they just can't carry enough parts and they're going to be more expensive even if they have them. So trust the business that's been serving auto part customers, that's been serving do-it-yourselfers for 2 decades. It's rockauto.com. Head over to their website, see all the parts available for your car or your truck. And while you're there, write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box. That way they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We talked a lot about Kevin Durant. We did 20 minutes on the Kevin Durant hypothetical because it's fun. Now I want to step back into the real world a little bit. Prior to the draft on Wednesday, the Blazers traded for Jeremy Grant. The trade hasn't gone through yet. It's still open. So like conceivably you could add a third team, you could add more parts, but like in principle, the trade has been agreed to, and the sort of basis of the trade is the Blazers had a traded player exception. They were able to absorb Jeremy Grant's salary perfectly into it, which really makes the adding Larry Nance Jr. to create a perfect traded player exception into that New Orleans trade. It makes you look a little sideways at it, like, it's that coupled with Shams Charania's reporting in freaking May that this trade was going to go down, maybe March this trade was going to go down, and then it ultimately went down for basically exactly what the Blazers had to give. Portland upgraded their roster with what seemingly relatively limited assets. The 2025 first round pick from the Milwaukee Bucks that is top 4 protected. That was sort of the bulk of the thing that they sent to the Pistons. They also traded back 10 spots in the draft and sent a couple potentially valuable deep future first round picks 3 and 4 years into the future. But the reminder here is that the value of these picks changes pretty significantly with context. The 2025 first round pick has been on a journey. It was originally belonged to Milwaukee Bucks. They sent it to New Orleans Pelicans along with a couple other firsts to acquire Drew Holiday. For the Bucks, it was a throw-in to go for it, to add to complete a championship level roster, mission accomplished. And for them, it was the price of doing business to get a star, to get that third star they desperately needed, to put them over the top, and they did. For the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that's hoarding a bunch of draft picks, it was backup draft capital that allowed them to sort of wheel and deal and agree to a trade, but knowing that they would have to give it away in the future. And it was basically the prize that the Blazers got back. It was like Portland's not going to have to take on any long-term salary that isn't Didi Louzada, and potentially Josh Hart, but it's like multiple non-guaranteed years. So if you don't want to, you can get out from under it, no problem. And you get this first round pick for your troubles. That's the sort of the value piece that the Blazers got. And at the time, it didn't seem particularly valuable. Trading CJ McCollum for a 2025 first round pick and some other stuff. Josh Hart's pretty good, but some other stuff and a first rounder. It's like, NBA starter, first rounder doesn't seem particularly valuable. When you flip it for Jeremy Grant, it seems more valuable, but it's particularly valuable to the Pistons in the way that it was less valuable to Milwaukee and maybe more valuable to not particularly valuable to Milwaukee, not particularly valuable to New Orleans. It becomes pretty valuable to the Pistons because it's a future first round pick and they take on no money, but they get this future first round pick. And the Pistons turned around on draft night and flipped the 2025 first round pick. The deal hasn't been finalized, so I believe that pick is going to the Knicks, and the Knicks are sending another pick to the Hornets, but that pick might be going to the Hornets. But regardless, they used it in a trade that allowed them to acquire the 13th pick in the 2022 NBA draft. The Pistons absorbed some bad money from the Knicks, did the Knicks a favor, and ended up getting themselves the 13th pick in the draft. For the Pistons, the 2025 first round pick ended up being worth a lottery pick. That 2025 first, again, from Milwaukee to New Orleans, from New Orleans to Portland, from Portland to Detroit, and Detroit out into the world, I believe, to Charlotte. When the dust settles on that very confusing trade, we can track where that 2025 pick is. But these picks have different values in different contexts. And I think when I was like going through all the trade stuff and saying, hey, the Blazers don't have a lot to trade, it's a reminder to consider the context for each team. For a team like the Pistons that was going to, hey, let us shed as much money as possible. This pick's great for us. And then let us take on some bad money and we'll send that pick in as the way that to facilitate upgrading in this draft and taking on some bad money, sort of double favors for teams. Like then the pick had real value. I think the context of trade parts matter, and the Blazers are heading into the offseason with not a lot of paths to be players in free agency. Like they have the mid-level exception. So does, that's a tool that a lot of teams have. So it's not like a real advantage over other teams. It's basically their tool and a tool that other people have in their tool belt. But like Portland has some chances to make trades. They've got some back half of the roster stuff, and they've got some second rounders, and conceivably they could make a deal with Chicago or trade a differently protected first round pick than what's owed to Chicago. And I think the reminder as we head into free agency, we head into this offseason in earnest, is that like when I'm considering these trades, talking to you, and when you're considering these trades, sending me emails and tweets and stuff, it's like the context of what it will mean for the other teams are super important. I think that 2025 first round pick is a good sort of a good microcosm of that phenomenon, is that teams are in different stages of building, different stages of whatever, and different stages of roster construction, and the value of these picks changes within the context for sure. A couple other pieces of news. Josh Hart's contract became fully guaranteed over the weekend. Hart is, he's really good, and he's probably better than than the money he's going to get paid this year. Probably underpaid in the league. The only way the Blazers would have not guaranteed Josh Hart's contract is if they were making the max contract play, like if they were going to renounce their trade exceptions, which they already used in Jeremy Grant, so that was the dream died then. But if they were going to create a max salary slot, that was the only reason they weren't going to have Josh Hart. Otherwise, it makes more sense to guarantee his contract and then he can be traded. You either keep him on the team because he's a good basketball player, you trade him because you need another good basketball player. I mean, but that's sort of a piece of housekeeping. Josh Hart's contract fully guaranteed as of June 25th. Another thing I want to say, and I missed this last week amidst the draft stuff, is rest in peace to Caleb Swanigan. Former Blazer, a two-time Blazer who dealt with a lot in his life to make it to the league, and then was out of the league shortly thereafter, didn't finish his rookie contract, and clearly was dealing with a lot of stuff. Had always had a lot of issues with weight, and when he was out of the league again, his weight ballooned back up. Like he had lost a ton of weight as a youth to become an incredibly good college basketball player, and then a first round pick in the NBA draft, and an NBA player realizing his dream. And then when he was out of the league, there was just photos of him surfaced of him again dealing with the struggles that he had his whole life. This is someone who grew up in the immense poverty, in and out of homeless shelters. When I was in his rookie year, I wrote a story about him, like going back to Utah and driving by the old homeless shelter that he had lived in with his, family members, and seeing that it had been torn down and replaced by condos. And he was like, it was moving to him to see the change both in himself and in the town that he had, in the city that he had spent a brief time in. He moved a lot as a child. So rest in peace to Biggie Swanigan. Someone who I didn't get to know well in my, I was a day-to-day reporter covering the team, beat reporter covering the team when he was on the team. So I spent a lot of time, around him in the locker room, but I still didn't forge like a deep relationship with him. But I want to say this. The best part of being a fan is getting to root for guys like Caleb Swanigan, getting to root for guys who made it to the league despite some obstacles, and who got to their ultimate goal, or got to achieve a dream, I should say, beyond ultimate goal. We all have different goals, but got to achieve a dream that seems so far from likely. And it's also a reminder these guys are humans. And we're rooting for laundry and rooting for, whoever's got the pinwheel on their chest or the sash across their jersey, whatever it might look like. But these are people dealing with real problems out in the real world, and to treat basketball players, even on your favorite team, with grace, regardless, if you're capable of doing so, because the point of rooting for these teams, the point of that I always try to get across my podcast is that joy is fleeting. So cling tightly to it when you have it. And I think the best way I can remember Caleb Swanigan is to say, I will cling tightly to the joy of remembering covering his rookie year, a guy who made it, a guy who achieved that dream, because that's the best way that I know to preserve a memory for someone like that, is remember the true joy of seeing someone achieve their dream. Rest in peace, Biggie. Thanks everyone for listening. More shows this week. Free agency starts on Thursday. Locked On Blazers rolls along 5 days a week, available wherever you get podcasts. So why don't you make it part of your daily routine? Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to make it part of their daily routine and make it their first listen. And then come back for more. Come back for tomorrow's show. Appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.